Welcome everyone to Commit to Keiki's Talk Story session. Tonight, we are very pleased to have with us gubernatorial candidate, businesswoman, and former First Lady, Vicky Cayetano. We had the pleasure of meeting with Mrs. Cayetano for our first Commit to Keiki forum in March to learn about how she intends to improve access to important programs like childcare, mental health, and family violence prevention and intervention for our youngest Keiki and their families. Tonight, we will have an opportunity to go deeper into more specific priorities with Mrs. Cayetano. For those of you that don't know, Commit to Keiki is a nonpartisan education initiative in partnership with the Early Childhood Action Strategy partners, our business community, early learning, and advocates for mental health and family violence. Our primary goal is to be a resource to the gubernatorial candidates and our next governor to ensure that investments are made that support young children and families. Today, we have with us Dr. Soma Gandhi, Hawaii Health Program Officer of the Stupski Foundation and member of the Commit to Keiki Steering Committee, who will be our moderator this evening. Let me go over just a few quick points about how this talk story will work. It's intended to be a friendly conversation with the candidate. We'd like to hear from Mrs. Cayetano how she intends to prioritize programs for our youngest children and their families. Our moderator will kick things off with some questions, and then we'd like to open it up to Q&A from our audience. Commit to Keiki Steering Committee members will have an opportunity to come off mute and on screen to ask their questions. Others in the audience, please send your questions via the chat function. Hopefully we can get to all of the questions during this hour-long discussion. Until we get to the Q&A, we ask that you all please leave your videos turned off so that we can spotlight the speakers. This forum is being recorded and will be made publicly available on Alelo and our website. Thank you all very much for joining in what is sure to be an informative and exciting discussion. Soma, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you, Carrie. As Carrie mentioned, my name is Sulma Gandhi, and I am the Hawaii Health Program Officer for the Stupski Foundation. Several years ago, the Stupski Foundation partnered and invested in an effort in California, the Choose Children campaign, which resulted in California's new governor committing significant state investment in early childhood health, safety, and learning. We were excited to embark on something similar in Hawaii, Commit to Keiki. The result in California has had a significant impact on children and families. We believe the same can and should happen here in Hawaii. So without any further delay, it is my pleasure to introduce to you Vicky Cayetano. Vicky Cayetano was born on March 16, 1956 in Manila, the Philippines, and immigrated to the US at age 3. She grew up in San Francisco and attended Stanford University, majoring in business and economics. She left Stanford before her junior year to start a successful travel agency, which she later sold. In 1982, she moved to Hawaii, where she married and started a family. After divorcing, she raised her 2 children as a single working mother. An entrepreneur at heart, she co-founded United Laundry Services, ULS, in 1987 and has led the company as president for 35 years. Under her leadership, ULS has grown to become Hawaii's largest laundry company. ULS employs nearly 1,000 residents. In 1997, Vicky married then-sitting Governor Ben Cayetano. As First Lady, she founded the Washington Place Foundation and raised more than $1.2 million in private donations for the construction of a new governor residence and allowed Washington Place to be preserved as a museum. She has advocated for animal rights and was instrumental in the passage of a bill banning the sale of shark fins. Vicky has been a longtime supporter of the community, and the Cayetanos and United Laundry Services have donated to approximately 40 nonprofit and charitable organizations. In addition, the Cayetano Foundation Scholarship provides 20 college scholarships to students in financial need every year. Welcome, Mrs. Cayetano. Before we begin, I share with you personally, Vicky, the experience as a longtime resident of Hawaii Island, in fact, a mother raising children, and the immigrant story, which is also vibrant in my lineage. We have a lot to cover, so let's begin. Would you please take a minute to remind folks who may have not been at our first talk story about yourself and why you are running for governor.
Well, I'm running for governor for two reasons. One, most important, is for our young people. They are the future of our state. And yet, for 5 years in a row now, we have seen the population in Hawaii shrink. And the saddest part is it's the young people and our working people who are leaving our state. So I always say to myself, if they, the future, are leaving Hawaii, what kind of future can we hope to have? The second reason is how to stem this tide and to create a thriving economy, a thriving community in Hawaii. In order to do that, in my mind, we need a different mindset and one that can bring results-driven leadership to the table. You know, we're not short on studies, committees, and analysis, but we fall short on acting and creating action plans in order to put in place all these well thought out ideas. A lot of good intentions, but it's time to turn that from intent to create and to implement. And that's what my 34 years of experience has been. That's why I'm running for governor. Thank you.
Thank you, Vicky. I see so much about how important the thriving community and economy connects to why our youth and our young people can, and we hope for them to stay. They're very interconnected. I'm going to move to our next question. As you are aware, we recently conducted a second poll of Hawaii's voters that revealed remarkably cohesive and consistent support across all islands for Hawaii's next governor to prioritize affordable, high-quality childcare and early learning programs for our youngest Keiki. Nearly 3/4, 73.9%, said it was important or very important. Additionally, Hawaii business owners have expressed concern and support for a well-prepared and well-educated workforce. Numerous studies confirm that the earlier you engage Keiki in early learning and early intervention services, the better off and better prepared they will be when they enter school and the workforce. What will you do, Vicky, to ensure that every Keiki has this opportunity?
Well, I think that, as you said, the poll showed without a doubt that the majority of our people absolutely support it. And of course, during this last session, the legislators made great strides for early childhood by allocating $200 million for preschool facilities. This is a great first step. But as we all know, to implement and execute is the most critical part of realizing these dreams. And so one of the things I absolutely would do as governor is to work with the Department of Education, but also I believe the private sector and nonprofit organizations can play a very key role so that, again, with all these valued stakeholders at the table, let us work together to be able to implement the $200 million to preschool facilities across our state. And as in my campaign, what I am finding is, I don't think it's intended to be, but I do feel that the neighbor islands are often not given the kind of resources and support that we find on Oahu. So I think we have to really understand this and have an awareness that this is the situation and really work hard to correct that. So in everything we do, we need to ensure that the neighbor islands as well as Oahu gets addressed. And I think that this is a great first step that the legislators, the lawmakers have allocated. But we need to bring the nonprofit, the private sector, and the Department of Education together so that we can implement this into reality.
Yeah, you're really focusing on the execution and the implementation more so after whatever policy or funding is written on paper that would happen. And you're talking about bringing a number of the stakeholders together that really need to be part of that implementation. And very much appreciate that, as well as the realization that neighbor islanders and the resources might be a little bit different for those communities.
And I think it's
Yeah, go ahead.
important on the neighbor island to really have, as I kind of joke, as us on the ground, in other words, to trust at the local level, because they have a greater and a better understanding of what their needs are. And so we should not govern strictly from Honolulu. Our governance, or my administration, would really seek to have folks on the ground as part of the stakeholders to really implement what's needed, not just by island, but even by each community, because there really are unique needs, especially, I would say, on Hawaii Island and Maui in particular, where they're quite different from one community to another. So I would recognize that and make sure that they're part of the discussion and implementation.
And that sounds very much like decentralizing, maybe some of the stakeholders and the decision making in that way. Thank you. My next question. COVID has laid bare and exacerbated the stress that families face. Examples include access to childcare, mental health needs, family violence, and a lack of affordable housing. There is a direct correlation between a healthy family home environment and a thriving Keiki. Our survey revealed a whopping 81.9% of voters think it is important for Hawaii's next governor to prioritize programs that address mental health, and 82.2% think it's important for Hawaii's next governor to prioritize programs that prevent family violence. As Hawaii's next governor, how would you build and fund a continuum of culturally appropriate and available family support and mental health programs across all islands to prepare our youngest Keiki for the challenges that lie ahead?
So I think there's two kinds of mental stress. There's a mental illness that one has that I call for a designated state hospital to provide a continuum of services. Because mental illness is not something one cures, it is something that one must manage. And with mental illness, especially in adults where they just go through the emergency rooms and are treated as a single case, that is not doing a lot of service to these residents. What they need is an ongoing treatment program, even to when they are being able to be, residents and working people back into the community. They still need this kind of network of support. And so I do feel very strongly that we need to provide a continuum of services to those with mental illness. But with short-term stress that triggers mental illness, we need to address the systemic issues that cause that. Children, for example, there's no doubt that our children, I would have to say pretty much across the board, private or public schools, have paid a very big price these last 2 years with COVID. It is very hard for them to communicate, whether it's remotely or with the mask on. My grandson is on the spectrum, and it's so hard for him to be masked all day and to try to communicate that way. It's just not the same. This is where I think it's so important to have leadership that will find a way, thinking out of the box, to create a safe environment for our students without requiring them to wear a mask all day, or to strictly give them the remote option when some schools and teachers are not set up for that yet. So again, we can't have a one size fits all. We really have to lean on principals and teachers of every school to see what works best for them and their students. Every child is unique. And when we make these decisions across the board, we're really doing a disservice to many of these children. So I feel that's really important when we're setting policy, to understand that and to, again, lean on each school to see what works best for them. There's no question that the strain of COVID, of being locked in, has absolutely added to mental and emotional stress. And for that, I feel again that the resources across all islands, but especially on the neighbor islands, is extremely inadequate. How to solve that, I don't have an answer right now, but I think the first step is to recognize that is a major problem. And I would look to working with nonprofit organizations as well as the Department of Health in order to prioritize mental illness on all islands.
Thank you. I appreciated how you were talking about differentiating per child and per family, because we're all different and all of our neighborhoods are different as well. Part of that question was related to preventing family violence. Do you have any thoughts related to that and how you might help fund a continuum of culturally appropriate care and support services related to family violence?
So Domestic Violence Clearinghouse is an organization that I support here on Oahu. But it's disappointing that there's not enough funding, or at least right now, they're not given the kind of funding to be able to expand or to have other islands have their own domestic violence agencies. So that is something I really would work with stakeholders who have knowledge in this arena to see what we can create on every island. Sometimes I do believe that the nonprofit organizations, given the tools, can create something much more quickly than we can at the state level. So there are times that I think the state plays a better role in funding this and allowing these nonprofits to be able to accelerate and expedite this kind of service, even as we look at collaborating towards a long-term solution. But the most important thing is to move with urgency in resolving these issues, because whenever we delay implementation to a problem like domestic violence and mental illness, the problem only gets worse and only becomes more difficult to solve. So that's what I would do is, look to working with nonprofit organizations and see what we can do to address these problems on each island in the most effective and expedited manner.
Thank you. It sounds like you're talking a little bit of upstream support as well, so that we can prevent the aspect of prevention for needing the intervention for the cases of family violence that does happen across our state.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. And I would just want to add, I think especially when it comes to children, we need to work with the legislature and strengthen the laws so that we can encourage reporting and also being able to have intervention, because no child's life should ever be risked. To me, that is just something that I feel so strongly about. And so, but in order to do that, I think we must work with the legislature, law enforcement, in order to be able to put teeth behind these laws in order to make sure that the child's welfare must always come first.
That sounds like a multifaceted approach and way of thinking around how to support our families. My next question for you. Would you agree or disagree that Hawaii's next governor needs to create a streamlined, integrated system for our youngest families to easily access help when they need it? If so, why? If not, why not? And secondly, from your perspective, what are the key components of an integrated system from birth that supports our youngest families and their Keiki?
So that's an interesting question, because I've always shared that you have training for every job except that of being a parent. And it's the most important job. So absolutely, I would support that. And yes, it should be integrated from the time that a child is born. There is a fine line between the privacy issues that we must respect for families. But at the same time, I think that most people, if we educate and communicate from the time a child is born, the resources that are there for these families, especially to mothers, I do believe we have a better chance that they will seek these services out. We can't force it on them, but the first thing we have to do is make it available, right? Create the system, make it available, and then work again with the hospitals, the physicians, pediatricians, so that when they leave that hospital with their child from that moment on, just kind of ingrain them already that this is part of what it takes to raise a child. I think that's really key. And absolutely, I would support it. That's the best investment we can make in our families.
Yeah, it is definitely challenging navigating what resources are out there, or any kind of, as a parent, anything that comes up in when you're upbringing and raising your child, it's challenging to know what the resources and referrals are. So what I'm hearing from you is the education, that outreach on letting people know what is available.
Yes. And I think, again, from a practical perspective, when you talk to hospitals, physicians, or nurses, they never have enough time as it is to do their work. So I think this would have to come in the form of counseling through an outside agency, a nonprofit that would do this just to support and give counsel to the families before they leave with their baby, and just show them, explain to them the spectrum of services and communicate it, not in the way of like when you have a problem, but more like as a proactive and part of raising a child, that these services are here and you really should take advantage of it. Because there's no question, especially for first-time parents, that it's a very stressful time. And women who suffer from postpartum depression, oftentimes don't even know what that is. They don't know what the symptoms are. So I always believe in talking about it so that it's out there, it's in the open, and it's nothing negative, but just part of life and what we can do to support each other.
Thank you, Vicky. My next question, we asked voters to identify specific policies, if supported by a candidate for governor, that would make them more likely to vote for that candidate. Among the policies, we found 74.4% of voters would support creating a Hawaii child tax credit, similar to the federal child tax credit that was put into place during the pandemic. What are your thoughts on implementing a child tax credit? Is this something Hawaii families need, and how would you propose implementing it?
I think that it makes sense to consider that. And I would definitely look at it perhaps for people who, especially I would look at having a higher tax credit for people who are making under $150,000 a year. I think that there should be a threshold where perhaps it's not as meaningful to those who are affluent, but I think for those who are under a certain income level, we absolutely should give a tax credit. I think that would be very helpful to families.
Thank you. I have one more question before we move to our audience questions that Carrie will help facilitate. So my last question is, what are your thoughts on universal preschool for all 3 and 4-year-olds by 2032?
Well, I absolutely support it. And I would like to ask if we could do it sooner than 2032. I'm all about, as I said, urgency. And I think that when you have a good idea, the sooner we get it off the ground, the better. Now, we may not be able to roll across the entire state, but I really would like to see us be able to do pilot programs that we can learn from within 12 months, so that we can then look at that. And then when we roll out all the others, we can stage them, and we can, having learned from these mistakes, we can have a smoother rollout. But I would certainly strive to do it sooner than 2032.
There's an urgency that I'm sensing from you to make that happen. I appreciated having this conversation with you. I'm going to now turn it over to Carrie, who will share questions from our audience.
Thank you. I've enjoyed it very much. You're a great interviewer. You make me feel very comfortable.
Oh,
Thank you.
thanks. Carrie.
I'm trying to come off of video. There we, oh, not working. Heidi, would you mind putting us back? Thank you. Mind putting us back to gallery? Thank you. And then if I could please ask the steering committee members to please come on screen. Vicky, we're excited that we have Alice Luck from Kauai visiting us. We have Joanne Farnsworth from the Infant Mental Health Association. We have Kanoi Enos, who is with Ali Alliance. Nancy Creedman from Domestic Violence Action Center. We have Kaiulani Lahea from Ahopunana Leo. And we have Vivian Eto, who does a lot of our early care and learning work. And then we have Sean Kanayapuni from Partners in Development. And I wanted to actually start today, and we have Al Castle. Hi, Al, from the Samuel Ann and Mary Castle Foundation. I wanted to start us off tonight. So there was a study that just came out Thursday, and it came out of the Massachusetts General Hospital and Harvard Medical School. And they're finding that coronavirus infection during pregnancy is linked to brain development problems in babies, which is really concerning. And so when we make this decision to really commit to our youngest, we are anticipating that we will have some challenges in the upcoming years about how to do that well. And so I'd like to ask some of our steering committee members if they have some questions for you. Keeping that in mind, it's interesting. I'll send you the link to the article, but they're linking to autism and even bipolar disorder in our youngest Keiki, which is concerning. So with that frame, and that really critical investment in our youngest from birth and even prenatally, I'd like to turn it over to some of our committee members.
Carrie, before you turn it over, may I ask a question on that? Did they in their report indicate how they were able to determine this?
Yes, they examined, it was 7,500 babies born at Massachusetts General Hospital and Harvard and through the Harvard Medical School. So it was a partnership, and they followed babies, 7,500 babies born during the pandemic, and then controlled for the babies that were exposed to the virus by their mom in utero.
Okay. And so they saw the symptoms then of bipolar, and how old were they when they were diagnosed?
That's a great question. I'd have to read the full study. It would have to be right between the first 2.5 years, because the study started in April of 2020.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
So just 2 years. Good questions.
So Vicky, I think that's my cue here. So this is Joanne. And I am, I'm the local chapter president for our Association for Infant Mental Health, and so that really covers the scope of behavioral health and mental health services and social emotional development for children from really honestly from prenatal to 5. And we already have, what Carrie just pointed out, really puts a pin on the urgency of the issue. But the work is already in play. We have spent the last 2 years, a number of us, very cross-departmental group of people, putting together a statewide integrated early childhood, infant and early childhood behavioral health plan. So that work is in play, and we have come up with really our first 3 priorities for how to bring that plan to life. And so what we are going to really need from our next governor is the support of that plan. It's a cross-departmental plan. It's government, non-government agencies working together on the plan. It's really truly been very exciting to be a part of, to see that work develop. So what we're most, we've prioritized, it's a big plan like all plans are, but we have really prioritized the 3 most important things that we want to do in the next 2 years. So that's what we're really coming to our gubernatorial candidates with. So the first one is we come into this whole realm of early childhood mental health services with a very undeveloped workforce, much like we have across the board in early childhood services. But the mental health piece is particularly needs a lot of strengthening. So workforce development is a huge piece. And that kind of runs the gamut from people who provide services, in home visitation programs, all the way through childcare, that whole, wherever families touch in early childhood, building the competency of really understanding early childhood mental health into those fields. With that, takes a lot of training. So we've got a model, we've got a good start on it. We've turned out, 2 cohorts of trained people, but that gives us about 30 people, to tell you the truth. And that is not a system made, right? It's the beginning. And so that work needs to be expanded. The other part of that is we really need to build the therapeutic end. So if you want to call it the more professional end, of people, providers who really are skilled in what treatment is needed for little children. So we're focusing on trying to train clinical providers. Where we want to place these folks is we are in the process of developing a consultation system that will be available to all providers and families, who are working with young children. And so they will be in home visitation programs. They will be available to home visitation programs. They'll be available to people who are providing childcare both in their home and in center-based programs, for families. And they will also be able to access directly by the families themselves. So that, that consultation system, we are in the process. We have a wonderful gift of, because we've done so much in this arena already, we have a couple years, of technical assistance that is being provided for, to the state to develop this system. So we're well on our way. And what we really need from our next governor is the support to prioritize this work and to get some money. These currently are not line items in a budget. This is all being funded through philanthropic work. And we need to really start to begin to integrate it into our ongoing systems and develop those budget pieces so that we can continue the work. So, that's, and anybody else who is, Carrie, you've been working on this very closely with us. If there's anything that you want to sort of add to that statement of need for support from our next governor, that would be great.
The only thing I would add is just the focus on workforce development, which I saw a lot of people nodding. We have an issue across the board. Yeah. Thank you, Joanne, for framing, particularly the mental health.
Yeah, that's obviously very critically important. And I think one of the pieces is until we are able to develop homegrown, as you say, it takes time and training. We must find a way to incentivize people to come here. And so that's, fortunately for us, Hawaii is someplace that a lot of people wouldn't mind coming here for a 2 to 3 year assignment. So I would out and work with folks like you who know what the issues are, but also collaborate with your counterparts on the mainland or other parts of the world to see what we can do, not only with offering affordable housing that's designated for, as I call in my affordable housing program, designated workforce housing for healthcare professionals, but also we could create for certain positions that we desperately need, especially in healthcare. Perhaps we could create a tax exempt status for folks, just to send a loud message out that we really need people to come to Hawaii. And as I said, it could be for a 3-year assignment, but something that gives us a little bit of time while we're trying to develop locally here the talent, the people that we need in order to fill that on a long-term basis.
Yeah. That's a great idea. I think, what we know, and you've spoken to this in all of our conversations with you, you've spoken to this, I think, very eloquently, about how parents need to know, if they're going to be, if they're going to be able to be effective in the workplace, they need to know that their children's behavioral, emotional development, their mental health needs are being addressed by the care in which they're placing them. And, otherwise they can't focus on their job, right? If they're worried about their children acting out or their children being isolated or however it may play out in a particular child. So it really is about giving families that security, knowing that part of their child's life, there's not just their diapers that are being changed, right? that part of their life is really being supported and taken care of. And I think it will help all of our workers. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Joanne. And thank you, Vicky. Others that might have questions for Vicky.
One of the things I would just like to share with you is that as governor, I would reach out to the private sector and I would really work with them as well as our stakeholders in childcare to find a way to incentivize companies so that they can provide childcare to their employees at the workplaces. Now that I'm finding a lot of businesses allowing their employees to work remotely, they have excess office space that could be converted really for childcare. And of course, they would hire a third party to oversee that. But I think, and if the company is given some form of credit to do that, it adds to the incentive for them to offer this to their employees. But I think that would really be the ideal world where employers offer that to their employees, is having affordable childcare on premise. Sorry, did I interrupt?
Hello. Hi, Vicki. It's Nancy Creedman, Domestic Violence Action Center. Hi. I have a question. I know that you speak pretty eloquently about the economics of our daily living and our community's challenges. One of the experiences that we have at the community-based organizations that you've been referring to is that the true costs of doing business, we're all small businesses as well, the true costs are not included as part of the contracts that we enter into with our government partners. So each year, the cost of health insurance goes up, electricity goes up, pencils go up, Xerox leases go up, and we receive contract awards that are the exact same dollar amount as the year before and the year before and the year before. And we're trying to figure out the best way to advocate and educate our community about this shortfall that grows every year for organizations like the Domestic Violence Action Center. So that's kind of one question. But my second question also has to do with compensation for people who are doing the hard work that those of us on the ground are doing. We lose lots and lots of people to government agencies who all pay more, and to the private sector who all pay more. Not everybody can do the work that Joanne described or that our staff does. And I just wanted you to weigh in a little bit on either or both of those issues to give us some insight into, as a leader in the governor's office, how you would address those two challenges.
Excellent questions, and thank you for asking it. So first of all, I get what you're saying because, as you know, I sit on a couple of boards, and as you say, the funding, while your costs go up, the funding remains the same. Well, that's because you have people in office who aren't business people and who don't get it. They say, well, why can't you do more with less? Hello, they just don't understand that. So one, I think it's that understanding in a leader that makes all the difference, okay? Of course, costs go up. And in order to retain people and to keep the services on par or to even improve, we have to compensate. That's just how it is. And it's more costly. You know, a lot of times I find that people in government are very penny wise and pound foolish, right? They want to save a little bit of here, a little bit of there, and then it turns out to cost us so much more. So I would lead with one, communicating that to my colleagues, the legislators, so they understand that. But the second thing is, you must be reading my mind and heart, because for so long I have been really concerned about our nonprofits. And I always say, without them, they provide the safety net to so many in our community. This is why I would work with the legislature to introduce the Community Reinvestment Fund, which takes from businesses making over 5 or 10 million, requires them to designate a certain percentage of their sales, their revenue from Hawaii to nonprofit organizations. This will create this is a game changer. This will create such a new source of support for you all in the nonprofit world. Because the sad part is many of these retailers who are first in their, you know, the Costco at Ivalai is #1 in North America. The CPK in Kahala is #1 in the chain. And yet when you go and ask for any contribution, you don't get anything. So my message to them as a business person is, this is also for you as a business, because when you start losing your community, you don't have a business base to work off of. We must create sustainable models. So you can imagine that if a business is required to give that to nonprofits, this is what our company does. This is what Foodland does, right? At the end of every year, we give this, we file our tax return and we give it. And frankly, the amount I don't want to get lost into all the details, but the amounts that most local companies give, and I've talked with them, is much more even than what I have in mind to require. But this would bring millions of dollars into the system, millions. So this is what I've been thinking, because when we lose nonprofits like all of you on this call, you can't hope for government to step in. We could never do it even close to what you folks do it and do it effectively. It's impossible. This is why we must take care before we start losing. Already I see a lot of challenges. So we need to stem this before it becomes too late.
Thank you, Vicky. I'm gonna, Sean, do you have a question?
Oh, yeah, I was just going to ask, but if you want to go ahead.
No, why don't you go, and then I will ask Doug Adams' question.
Oh, okay, super. Thanks for tonight and for sharing your thoughts and your plans. It's good to hear from you tonight. My question is focused on supporting families in the early childhood development and teaching process. And in particular, the state has decided to invest a little bit more in family-child interaction learning, which is a powerful way to educate multiple generations at the same time. Your very youngest keiki, and then the makua or parents or kupuna or grandparents that are teaching, that are at home with them. And so it's a really powerful model when you think about investing in families that then in ways that then strengthen community. And not everybody wants to send their child to a center-based preschool. So, how would you look at investing in FCILs in your plans and thoughts about the early childhood education landscape?
So just to make sure I understand, Sean, your question, you're saying for parents who don't want to send them?
Well, it's for families that are, for example, when you have multi-generational households, 62% of Native Hawaiian households include grandparents and young keiki grandkids living together. And so in those instances where, for example, grandparents are caring for their young keiki, we have programs like some of ours at Partners in Development Foundation. Tutu and Me is one example. There's Keiki Okaina, there's Keiki Steps that do family-child interaction learning. So the family brings their child to the learning center. There's a bunch of different things that can go on there, but it's the entire family that's learning while the early childhood learning is the focus.
So
is that a familiar model to you?
Right. So perhaps those organizations could qualify also, as you say, for like if we're funding, if we're talking about funding preschool, maybe those organizations could also qualify for a certain tax credit or funding. And again, there needs to be certain, I think, criteria established, though they may be different from universal preschool. I recognize that, but it could be another option to support them if that's what the community wants.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sean, and thank you, Vicky. And Doug Adams' question, who's from Hawaii County, is aligned a little bit with Sean's in terms of potential funding. So he says, Mrs. Cayetano, DOE teachers work hard to educate our 5 to 18-year-olds. Research indicates, though, that children learn most effectively and quickly during the time of life from infancy to toddler. Would you encourage DOE to strengthen its efforts to resource initiatives that help our youngest children learn through intentional methodologies, either through early childhood education programs or by helping parents?
I think that, certainly I would talk to DOE, but I almost think that because this segment is different from the 5 to 17, 18, as you say, that perhaps we should look at it as separate from the DOE and work with, I would work with organizations like yours to look at it and see, because sometimes when like the Department of Education, it's so challenged as it is with all the bureaucracy and the layers, that if we want to do something new, I almost think that we would consider a branch of it, but separately, so that there is more autonomy, so that they can move a new program forward more quickly. And because it is a little bit different from what their traditional way of governance is at DOE. So again, I'm just open to ideas. I think the important thing is to recognize the need and then to collaborate with folks like yourselves who know the issues and the communities to come up with the best model.
Great, thank you. We have one more question from Marissa Ross in the Q&A. And she asked, could you tell us more about your family-focused plan, but more plans specifically here on Oahu?
So my family-focused economic plan is just basically saying that when we make any decisions, we must put the family at the center of those decisions. In other words, the impact to the family. And I'm referring specifically to new projects or, I asked, for example, on Hawaii Island, where our laundry is in Kona. And all these beautiful hotels and multi-million-dollar homes are there along the Kohala coast. But where are the homes for the employees, the workers? Are they expected to drive from Hilo over there? That's not sustainable. When those developments came up, they should have said how many employees are needed. And with that comes affordable housing and schools and parks. That's what I mean about a family-focused economy, that we need to consider the impact to the family at the heart of all the decisions that we make. I hope that answers your question.
It does, and I really love that response personally. Thank you for that. We have time for a couple more questions.
But-
Wait,
Benoit.
wait.
No, sweetie, you go ahead. I've
I'll
talked.
take a stab. I'll take a stab. Thank you, Vicky. I just wanted to mahalo you for your response about recognizing the important role. I come from a family of I've basically been reared on nonprofit salaries my entire life. I'm coming from the west side of Oahu, and it's funny. I want to thank you for your response, recognizing. I do believe that the nonprofit sector it is the glue that keeps society together. And so you talked about wanting to honor that and understanding the sacrifices that is made by folks, and especially in the social services side. I wanted to share a quick story. I remember once when I graduated college, a few years after college, and I was golfing. What just so happened to don't know how it happened. I coached with a guy who was a mortgage broker. I didn't even know what that was. And there's a bunch of them, and they were talking about and I was a newly minted MSW, Master Social Work, right? When I found out the kind of money they were making, pardon my French, I felt like a sucker. Same amount of time in college. And then I had to go back and think of my family. My dad is a political activist entire life. And I thought, like, if we really honor a man's worth or a woman's worth or anybody's worth, right, in the general sense in Western society, how much money they make, what message does that tell me? What message does that tell the communities that we serve? The people who help you, the people that keep the glue that keeps the community together should struggle. You should share the struggle of your clients. And so I'm curious, as you say, honoring the nonprofit sector, how much political will do you think exists now within state government to honor sentiments like that? And I'm just curious, and how do we get there? Because I firmly believe you lose the front line, you lose the health and safety of everyone in our community. So I just want to ask you that simple question. Mahalo. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Well, I think it starts with educating and enlightening people so they understand. And I'm very vocal when it comes to standing up for what's right. So, that's the first thing that I would do is make sure that the people who make these decisions, like as governor, be my colleagues in the legislature, that they're fully aware of this. But that's what you need. You need a leader who gets it and who is going to collaborate, because there's no way you can shove things down to make things happen. But I think just leading by example. But I understand, because like I said, I sit on nonprofit boards, and it just kills me. Every year, what we get in the contract is either we're so happy if it's even the same. Oftentimes it's even cut, and yet the demands are more. I mean, how does that make sense? That cannot be. So, it takes leadership that understands that. And all I can say is that that's one of the first priorities I have. That's why I came up with that community reinvestment fund. And I've got to tell you, some people in the business community, not the ones who give generously, frankly, but others said, oh, this is going to stop business from coming. And I said, that's not true. And if it's those type of business, Hawaii doesn't need them. Okay, so we have to start somewhere, but by golly, we can make this, we can do this. And that community reinvestment fund, in my mind, is a real game changer. And the other thing I would just share is understanding the different needs on each island is one thing. Putting in place action to make things happen is another thing. And one of the first things I would do as governor is to create at the cabinet level a director position for Hawaii Island, Maui, and Kauai as well. So that at the cabinet level, they will have the access and the interaction with other directors for other departments that they need in order to, again, expedite collaboration and expedite solutions to the problems that each island faces. So it's not just the talk, but it's putting in place things that will make a difference. Thank you.
Mahalo. Mahalo.
Thank you, Vicky. That was probably music to Alice's ears, who's representing Kauai right now. And I wanted to comment, Zoe made a comment in chat, highlighting the importance too for that community reinvestment fund to make sure that it isn't just our large nonprofits that often are the ones that get, you know, the significant contracts and grants, but we're also looking at supporting our smaller nonprofits that do very similar and impactful work. They just don't have the supports that the large ones have, and so they often monopolize the funding. So thank you, Zoe, for that comment. It was very helpful. Okay, with that, I'm going to turn it back to Soma to, unless there's a final question. Anybody have a final question that they really want to ask?
I think Joanne had one.
Thank you, Terry, for recognizing that. But, you know, I mean, it's like Kanoi said it all. So I really don't have, I'm speechless. I have nothing to add.
Kanoi often leaves us all speechless.
Well, I'd be remiss if I didn't just spend a minute to say thank you to each one of you on this call for all that you do every day, for the ones who need our love and our support most of all. So I know sometimes it's very frustrating because it's not being recognized enough. There is such a disparity in how we pay. You know, you read athletes getting this amount, and then, you know, even musicians. You know, I have a heart for our artists, and one of the things I always that always kills me is whenever we do fundraisers, everybody always expects them to play for free, and I also say, is the food for free? If the food's not free, then why do we expect them to play for free? They can't live on aloha and love. They've got to get paid. So, you know, I think it takes a leadership that understands, a leader who understands, who gets it, and who's going to think creatively of how we can fix our problems, because the traditional ways are not enough to move the needle. We've got to have the courage to think boldly and have the courage to move things forward. So I thank you all so much for all you do.
Well, thank you very much, Vicky. Soma, I'll let you close this out.
Thank you, Vicky. Vicky, we really appreciate you taking the time to engage in this conversation with us. We hope you found it as rewarding as we did. For everyone on this call, if you like what you heard and want to learn more about Vicky Cayetano's campaign, please go to www.vickyforgovernor.com. A quick reminder, stay tuned for information on our next Talk Story forums in July with Kai Kahele and another with Heidi Suniyoshi. We hope you'll have the opportunity to join us. On behalf of all of us with Commit to Keiki, thank you for joining us. For more information and to stay up to date to Commit to Keiki happenings, please follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And please frequent our website, committokeiki.org. Thank you. Mahalo.
Mahalo.
Aloha.